Our next speaker is Pelham, and Pelham comes to us. He's the co-founder of the 9B group, and Pelham Straughn is going to join us here in just a bit. Let me turn over the control over to you, Pelham, see if we can make all this work for us today. And again, the same type of situation, folks. Use your Q&A questions dashboard, because as your questions come in, sometimes we moved on to the next presenter. Pelham, let's do a sound check with you.
Hey, Ray, can you hear me?
We got you, and we got you up on the screen too. So I'm going to cue down my video and just have your happy face in your presentation today. Thanks, Pelham.
Thanks, Ray, and I'm really excited to present today to the National Watershed Coalition's virtual conference. For those of you who don't know me, I am Pelham Straughn. I am a founder of the 9B group, which provides consultant services to the National Watershed Coalition. I spent nearly 18 years on Capitol Hill, 14 of those years with the House Agriculture Committee, working on these very important issues and programs. I would like you to think of me as sort of the eyes and ears in Washington for the National Watershed Coalition. I have some really great relationships on Capitol Hill and have really enjoyed working with people who just presented in front of me. Both Jimmy and Kevin are just such wonderful advocates for this program. First, the National Watershed Coalition has a job to continue to educate members of Congress on the watershed program and build off of our past success. Look, every 2 years, we have dozens of new members of Congress that come and sit on the Agriculture Committee. And so this education process is ongoing. We need to talk about and let them know about the watershed program and all that it can do. I will be frank with you. The watershed programs are not the most well-known farm bill programs out there. If you asked, of the 535 members of Congress, sure, there are certainly rural members that have these structures in their districts that know about the program, but this is something that we take seriously, is to let members know about the program, its successes, and so on. It was just a few years ago that the Watershed and Flood Prevention Operations Program was not even funded in the appropriations process. There was about close to a decade where we did not receive appropriations funding. That came to an end in 2017, where we did receive our first robust appropriations funding, and Kevin had a really good slide on that. Next slide. So how do we interact with members of Congress? Well, one of the best tools that we have is we write an annual appropriations letter for members of Congress to send to the Appropriations Committee. That letter for a number of years was headed up by Frank Lucas from Oklahoma and Colin Peterson from Minnesota. And they really worked with their colleagues to have members of Congress sign on to this letter supporting funding for the watershed program. We've had up to 40, 45 members of Congress. And when we talk to the appropriations staff, they really reiterate to us the importance of this letter, that it shows that the program has wide support, that both Democrats and Republicans and members from across the country support it. And so we spend a lot of time and effort on this appropriations letter. And, the success is sort of the proof is in the pudding. These letters and all of our effort, as Kevin pointed out, is we have seen consistent appropriations over the last 5 years, $150 million in FY17, all the way up to $175 million for Watershed in FY21. In addition to that, the National Watershed Coalition worked with really one of the great champions of the program, Chairman Frank Lucas, to have a hearing, a subcommittee hearing on the program in June of 2017. And I cannot tell you, and I cannot, sort of overestimate the importance of this hearing. Not only are the members of Congress there to sort of take in the testimony and the witnesses that the National Watershed Coalition provided, but also that testimony is distributed to the entire staff of the House Agriculture Committee and all of the members' offices that are members of that. So really, what we did accomplish with that hearing, again, can't be overestimated. That, I think, really did lead to success in the 2018 Farm Bill. And I think Kevin really said it really well, which was that we were able to get $50 million a year in permanent mandatory funding. Most conservation programs expire when the Farm Bill does, and these programs last 5 years and must be reauthorized through the new Farm Bill process. The Watershed program is permanent. In the legislation, it says $50 million for 2018 and every year after. And so that was, as Kevin said, that sort of floor or that baseline that we can work off of gives the department sort of the expectation that there will be funding there every year. We also worked at trying to incorporate the Watershed program and the watershed authorities into the Regional Conservation Partnership program. Not only allowing watershed authorities to be used across the entire country, it was in the 2014 bill, it was limited to the critical conservation areas, but it also allowed PL 566 the same flexibility afforded the cover programs and reducing complexity and administrative burden of the RCPP program. So talking a little bit about recent success, as everyone has probably read about, there are sort of two major bills that Congress has been spending the vast majority of this year on. One is the bipartisan infrastructure package, or more commonly known in DC as the BIF, that was recently passed by Congress. And then you have what we call the reconciliation process, that is $1.75 trillion that deals with a lot of different issues. But in this bipartisan infrastructure package, $500 million was authorized for PL 566, $118 million for dam rehab, and $300 million for the emergency watershed program. I mean, I think it really is a testament to all who are working on this program that this money was included in the infrastructure program. And this is language here that was cut and pasted from the actual law now that it's been signed by President Biden. $500 million to remain available until expended, $118 million to remain until expended. And so again, this is just another layer of funding, as Kevin pointed out in some of his charts. We're getting money from all different sources. $500 million over 10 years from the Farm Bill, $500 million until expended in the bipartisan infrastructure, and then our appropriations funding that comes every year. FY22, both the Senate and the House bill, of course, have money in it for PL 566, $198 million for in the Senate draft bill, $160 million in the House FY22 appropriations. I do want to sort of, hey, watch out, the big sort of note here that earmarks, or what are called congressionally directed spendings, are back. There are $23 million of earmarks that say you need to spend that money on these certain projects. Now, if you'll sort of do some math, you see the 198. Last year we had 175 million. So what they're doing is putting these $23 million of earmarks on top of the money that sort of we've received in the past. So Dan wanted me to talk about sort of our strategies and keys to success. The one thing that we have done a good job is identifying champions. And I'll be quite frank, Chairman Frank Lucas has been a champion of this program for as long as he has been in Congress. And I can't tell you how important these champions are. I tell people all the time, I would rather have one champion than 10 members of Congress that'll sign a letter. That champion will go to bat for you. They will talk to their colleagues. And so one is our work with our champions. Two is our work with partners. Our partnerships, and I really do have to call out our partnership with the National Association of Conservation Districts. They have been critical in our success on the Hill. And part of our legislative strategy is that we piggyback off of their fly-in that they bring members of conservation districts to Washington in March. And they, number one, they take our what we call leave behinds, and they help distribute those. But also, we as the National Watershed Coalition have meetings in concert with them, and they have really been an important partner. I'm going to give Dan credit here on this third point. Is he has always kept the National Watershed focused. We don't necessarily wade into the issue of the day. We don't use our political capital on whatever may be hot at the time. We are laser focused on the watershed programs and how to build off of past success and how to get investments in that important program. And then, as I talked about earlier, our approach letter, fly in with DC. But thirdly, I think it is incredibly important that we are a trusted resource for the Hill. If the Hill has questions about how, what's going on the ground, what the program really does, it's important to us that the Hill asks the National Watershed Coalition. And certainly whether it's Frank Lucas's office or the agriculture committees, we are that trusted resource. And then finally, I think the National Watershed Coalition has been incredibly engaging with welcoming new partnerships, whether it's folks in the West who are passionate about irrigation, or conservation organizations that are coming around to the incredible authorities and flexibility that PL 566 offers. We are there to work with them as long as they sort of have the same goals in mind as we do. Now, Dan wanted me to finish my presentation with the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is coming up, right? It needs to be done by the end of September 2023. It's usually at least 2-year process. And so it's beginning now. The two biggest questions facing the conservation title of the next Farm Bill is who will be in charge, right? A Republican Congress will write a different Farm Bill than a Democratic Congress. And so who will be in charge will really dictate opportunities, barriers, etc. And second, will the reconciliation package, which I briefly mentioned, currently awaiting action by Congress, how much money will be available to the committees? Currently, in the draft of the reconciliation bill, there's $28 billion. And so I think that is a tremendous amount of money, and whether that's available, whether that passes, how exactly that money is available to the Farm Bill is a big question. We have an excellent opportunity to make changes to the Watershed program. We had a question earlier about the 35% match. We've had questions about remedial work, et cetera. There are just lots of different sort of opportunities for us as we work towards our policy platform. I'll tell you, in the past, I think we have been really concerned about getting additional monies, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. But if I think we have a better opportunity than probably the last 2 or 3 farm bills to make changes that benefit the sponsors of these programs. I will tell you the program has grown in importance as the Congress has focused more on climate the last 2 years, 3 years. And the Watershed program should be seen as a critical tool for helping rural communities adapt to that increasing weather volatility, creating climate resilience and reducing risk against catastrophic weather events. While we have done really well working with our champions, I have noticed a real increase in members' offices knowing about the program, understanding that the program has vast authorities to deal with the effects of flood, climate, whatever you want to call it. And so people are looking at this program, and I think the opportunities really are quite tremendous. So Ray, I'll end it there and be open for questions.
Thanks, Pelham. And as we look for questions coming in, I've got one right now, and then we'll move to a couple of others maybe. Appreciate the funding for the Farm Bill. Does that mean only that we can only access it through the RCPP? And can the program only be used on private lands? As you know, many of the sponsors of PL 566 are state and local government, and they often own their own land. So the question has to do with can you only access the funding through the Regional Conservation Partnership Program?
No, absolutely not. And first of all, the $50 million in Farm Bill funding is just for the regular program. I think one of the nice things about it is that it's open not only to PL 566, but dam rehab as well. And so, no, that $50 million that I mentioned has nothing to do with RCPP.
Okay.
What the National Watershed Coalition saw was an opportunity for RCPP to sort of spread the accessibility of PL 566, that you could do that type of work within an RCPP project. And so those are two different things. Most of our conservation programs have to be done and implemented on private land, but PL 566 is not the same.
Yeah. Do you have any idea that so far specifically what the earmark funds can or will be used for?
Yeah, I mean, it is actually laid out. It's laid out in a project basis. It names the project in actually the report. Now, I think the big question is whether this makes it through the entire process, right? So this is in the Senate bill, not in the House bill. Will the House acquiesce to specific earmarks, and whether those earmarks would be the same as the Senate ones, I think are open questions. I sort of look at it as I noted, which was they're providing $198 million. That's $23 million more than they did last year. That $23 million is the money that is earmarked. And so I'm less offended by the earmarks, since it's in addition to the funding or the same rate of funding that we received in the previous appropriations bill.
Thank you. Pelham, how about the infrastructure piece that Jimmy mentioned in his presentation? Do you want to tap on that a bit?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I would say is that we are providing layers of funding, that we see that appropriations is one layer. The permanent farm bill money is another layer. The infrastructure money is another layer. And so I really, as Kevin talked about, having that predictability of the farm bill money is great. It's not a lot of money. It's $50 million a year, but having the predictability, the certainty of that money has importance. Then we see layering of that appropriations money, $175 million for the last 2 years, and then having this infrastructure money is really critical, especially since that money very clearly says that it's not lost after some period of time; it's until expended.
Okay, very good. So Pelham, questions will come in apparently while our next speaker is going, and if you don't mind pulling them up and answering them, typing in an answer if you don't mind. I think the one that just came in here on the application process of RCPP, not probably going to ask you to do that. Maybe Kevin will take a stab at that. I don't think you would be an expert on the Regional Conservation Partnership Program unless you want to take it.
Yeah. Let me take what's interesting is that there actually is, in the 2018 Farm Bill, there is sort of general language that asks the department to make the application process more simple. I think some folks were like, well, it's not specific enough to really mean anything. But I would tell you that I think one thing that I would like to do moving forward is to really identify those barriers, right? Working in a congressional office, you have people complain just very generally, and we want to fix your problem. I know NRCS wants RCPP to work more smoothly. So if we can identify very specific examples, I think that that does help. I do think there are other sort of statutory suggestions that could happen, whether it's giving the department more flexibility of sort of allowing flexibility in the covered programs. And so this is certainly something that I think all of us who are involved in RCPP, including NRCS, want it to go more smoothly. And I think that should be a goal for the next Farm Bill.
Thank you. Seems like a good program to get, data gathered, to get partnerships going, to start sharing expenses on a good project, and then you have to lift it almost to the next level of PL 566 watershed programs. But a good feeder program, you might say, is what I would kind of offer as observation, uninformed observation.
I think it's a really good point. I was on staff at the House Agriculture Committee when RCPP was written and authorized, and we had a number of goals when we sort of authorized the program. One is we wanted to see partnerships of sort of different types of partnerships, commodity groups and conservation and cities and others working together for common purposes. The second one is to focus on specific natural resource concerns in a specific geography. And I think that's really important. Day White used to say, former chief of NRCS, used to say, random acts of conservation are nice, but having that focused ability in a specific geography is really important. Third was leveraging, so providing private capital to along with the NRCS money. And then fourth, innovation. That's RCPP should be a program where we innovate and come up with sort of new delivery ideas and new practices and so forth.
Mm-hmm.